Hey, what's poppin', guys? Fizzle here. Today I'm bringing you the original Dust 2 collection, not the 2021 one, the original. And yeah, let's get started. So first things first, we have the Scar 20 Sand Mesh, which, yeah, very, very scratched. The first thing I notice, it's not a particularly horrible fact new, so seeing scratches here, 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 like everywhere in the fucking weapon is pretty bad. But if nothing else, the base coloring doesn't look horrible. Right? They use a very basic tan and like darker tan stripe going across the entire weapon, and then they add a chain link fence in front of it, as the mesh skins do. I really don't really like the look of those, but I can't say that this is particularly worse than stock, especially if you get a nicer finish, it could look nicer. So I'm gonna put this in the D tier, very low D tier. Don't get me wrong. I don't think I'd ever really want to pick this up at all, but I can't say this is particularly worse than like stock or just really, really bad in general. So yeah, D tier for that one. Nova Predator is the next one, which doesn't look as bad. So this is still fact new, still very scratched up, but the scratches actually kind of go with this pattern. I don't know what it is about this pattern. It's just brown stripes, red stripes, and like tan stripes going across the entire thing. Looks, a little bit nicer than stock, not by much. Still, at the most, this would be a C tier if it was like bright, but it's very dark, very unaffected by lighting, so that already puts it down a good amount. I don't really like too many skins like that unless they have a particularly nice design, which this one doesn't. But for some reason, this kind of, grainy sand texture that they use for the tan stripes, fits pretty well with all these scratches on the weapon, so it doesn't so it ends up looking a bit nicer than that Scar 20 that we looked at earlier. I still think this is a D tier skin. I still don't think it looks too great, but it's definitely a bit better than that Scar 20, if nothing else. Next up, we have the P90 Sand Spray. I'm noticing a pattern here. Pretty much every skin we've looked at so far is super tan. This one's no exception. It's just base bright tan P90, which would actually look pretty mediocre, I think, if it was just that bright tan. But they added these random smudges of darker tan, and then some parts almost look brown in the right lighting. And it's still scratched to hell as every old P90 skin is, and this is an old P90 skin. The OG Dust 2 collection is one of the first, if not like the first. I don't actually remember what the first is, but this is one of the first collections, so skins are going to be a bit worse, especially for wear. Because if you guys didn't know, originally the CSGO developers thought people would love having their weapons battle scarred over factory new. They were totally wrong about that, but they made a lot of the skins a lot more scratched because of that. So we ended up with stuff like this, where it's pointlessly, stupidly scratched on the front. Like, almost the entire front is being torn off, despite this being fact new. And the base skin doesn't look great. So I think it's another D tier. I can't say without it as like horrible, so I can't realistically put this in F tier, but these are D tier skins. Stuff I would pretty much never want, but I wouldn't say I would never want, right? F tier stuff I would literally never pick up, even if I was like paid to do it. Then we have the MP9 Sand Dash, another sand skin, but this one's a bit nicer, I guess. They kind of went for grainy sand on a weapon. I'm not sure how they got with that mindset, but that's what they went with. There's not too many scratches. This is still around the same wear. There's definitely some scratches here, here, like, but they're all hidden by this little, like these indents the MP9 has. They're pretty well hidden by those, and the fact that the whole design of the skin is supposed to be grainy sand, so it almost looks the same as the design. Um, for some reason, it has these random little like stripes of a little bit of a darker tan going across it, which looks kind of bad. I still gotta say this is a particularly bad weapon. I don't really like how it looks. I think from what we've seen so far, it's the best looking. I still think it's a D tier. I think a lot of these skins look virtually identical and they don't look good. So yeah. Then we have the G3SG Desert Storm, which is our first like unique design. And it's not very unique. It's just a basic sand camo skin. Has the same stupid amount of scratches on it that completely ruin a lot of these weapons. But since the weapon's a lot bigger and it has virtually the same amount of scratches, it actually ends up looking kinda clean, right? I would actually maybe consider picking one of these up because of the G3 cylinder used, and it doesn't look completely horrible. It is still a basic camo skin, but it does have a nice color scheme, very bright color scheme, which isn't good for most camos, but I like the look of it a bit better. Don't know particularly what. But yeah, I guess it's a C tier. I wouldn't hate to pick this up. Right? I wouldn't particularly mind. And we have the classic P250 Sand Dune, the go-to joke skin in CS. People always joke how expensive these things are when for all of CS they pretty much always been like 3 to 5 cents for anything. And I mean, despite it having that reputation as almost like the joke bad skin, I can't say it looks bad. It's literally just a tan version of the P250, which actually ended up looking relatively clean. And I know this might come as a surprise to people who kind of know this as the low tier P250 skin, or just skin in general, but I think it's a B tier. I really I don't think you can go wrong picking up a P250 Sand Dune, and that's kind of what B tier stands for. Is like weapons that you can't go wrong picking up, right? Like they're not bad pickups. A tier, S tier is like stuff you really want. C tier stuff that like maybe you'd want. D tier stuff that you would possibly pick up in like a last ditch effort. And then F tier you just don't want. So I think it's pretty easily a B tier. I don't think you can go wrong picking it up. Next up we have the sawed-off snake camo, which has a very basic tan finish, a lot brighter than the P250 though. Uh, and then almost like snake eggs, I guess, across the skin. I don't know what I'm looking at here. Uh, Kind of looks like paint blotches almost. Kind of like if you've ever painted something or whatever and then you spill a bit of water on it. That's what these kind of look like. You know, drops of water spilled on the thing, kind of ruining the initial design. Kind of getting some of the paint off. Doesn't really help the skin look better, but I can't say it's as bad as what we saw in D tier. I actually have to rethink some of this, man. These are all really bad looking skins. I'm gonna put it top of D tier. I might move that at G3 down as well. I don't know what I was saying when I was talking about it. And we have the Tech 9 Very Camo. It's basic sand camo, but for some reason also has the green of a normal camo mixed in. I think the red that most Very Camos use is a lot better than green here. I don't think the green fits with the sand camo. So I can't really say this is like a decent skin for people to pick up for this collection. I'm just gonna put this at C tier. Probably a bit better than the G3, which actually I'm gonna put between the MP9 the sawed off. I can't say anything in this collection is particularly good other than like the weirdly enough the P250 Sand Dune, which is known as the bad one. Next up we have the Mac 10 Palm, which actually looks okay. It has a very bright tan coloring to it, you know, as the Dust 2 collection just seems to love, just that tan coloring. But the design is kind of interesting. There's some white palm leaves just covering parts of the skin, and the rest of the skin uses basically the safari mesh kind of build, where it's just you know, a tan background with like a almost like a chain link fence just behind it, in front of it. But because of the coloring, you barely notice that, and at least for this pattern with a lot of like palm leaves, it doesn't look horrible with all this white in the middle and around the whole weapon. It looks like a very bright and very noticeable skin. So I'm going to realistically say it's the best thing we've seen so far. Bit better than the P250 Sand Dune, which is just a kind of clean skin that you wouldn't mind picking up. And we have the 5.7 orange peel, and we had an orange peel in our last collection, which looked horrible in like the Mac 10. But it doesn't look too bad on this particular 5.7. The problem with the last one is you saw a lot more of the tan background, and there was very little orange, and all of it was just randomly striped on the weapon. In this case, though, orange is covering like a majority of the weapon, and the background is like very blurred, so you can't really tell exactly what it has going on, which draws your eyes toward that orange and makes it look a bit nicer. Now, there is one big problem, which is that this is, I mean, this is a bad fact new, but still fact new, and you can see this massive scratch up here, which would be very visible in gameplay. But since it's just like almost like a black spot, it ends up not looking horrible. Um, so I can't really say this is bad. I'm gonna put this probably top of C tier. I wouldn't really hate picking this up. Don't think it's as good as the Sand Dune or the Palm, but it's not particularly bad. And then we have the AK-47 Safari Mesh, which is a bit of a classic. The Safari Mesh, very well-known skin, and it kind of looks okay in the AK. It's kind of weird how this one works, because most of the time, this kind of green tan coloring just makes you think of like a basic camo skin, which this is at the end of the day. But for some reason, the way that it's spread out, the color-wise on this AK just looks kind of okay, and it doesn't look horrible. And you barely notice the chain link fence pattern unless you look really close, unlike some other weapons where it's very noticeable. I'm not sure why this one has a sticker on it. They normally don't do that, so that's a bit of a weird, probably, artifact from how old this collection is. Um, but yeah, I mean, it doesn't look particularly bad in any lighting. It doesn't look particularly good, don't get me wrong. But I can't really say this is a bad skin. I can't say it's as good as the Palm, but I'd say it's a bit better than the Sand Dune, so I'll put it nice and firmly in the B tier. It's not a bad pickup, right? I wouldn't mind having this equipped. And then we have the PP-Bizon Brass, which is generally stock, other than a brass main finish, as the name would suggest. It's very dirty brass though. It's not even because of wear or anything. This is one of the best. Wow, this is like one of the best floats brasses out there that they managed to put up on CSGO Stash. But it yeah, this isn't even wear. This is just how the skin looks. Right. This is just kind of yeah. I don't like how dirty the back looks, even though that's not wear and it's like smudges. I guess intended to be on the weapon or something. Having a brass finish is a lot cooler than pretty much most things we've looked at, though. So just for that, I mean, I can put it relatively high. I could say bottom of B tier. I think top of C tier, right? I don't think it looks as nice, and I don't think it's as good of a play skin as the Palm, Safari Mesh, or Sand Dune. But I wouldn't mind having one of these. I don't think it looks particularly horrible. I don't think it looks that good because of this dirtiness, but if it wasn't super dirty in the back, which will never happen because this is literally one of the best wares you can get, so this will always be some degree of dirty. Um, if it wasn't dirty, this would be one of the better skins. I really like, the generally gold finish of brass. But yeah, unfortunately, it's like stupidly dirty in the back, which kind of ruins a lot of the looks for it for me. I don't say it's particularly horrible though. I still think it's a pretty decent skin, even with that. But yeah. And next up we have the M4A1S Very Camo, which is just your generic camo skin, although it does use a very nice color scheme. And I know I said the green doesn't work with tan, and that's because it doesn't, but having it barely sprinkled in like this, like there's like one to like three spots with green on it, and you can barely see it. It doesn't make it particularly bad, and I think it adds some color, kind of tricks your eyes into thinking this has more color than it does. So I can say this is probably it's probably the best C tier weapon we got here. Actually, I think it's a bit worse than the brass, but not by much. I think it's around the same as the brass. It's not a skin I would mind. I eh, wouldn't mind picking up this skin, but I can't say it's really good. It's just your generic camo skin, but it's a better looking camo skin that's just a bit brighter and just nicer looking than the average camo skin. So I can put it in the C tier for that. Next up, we have the SG553 Damascus Steel, and it's one of those lovely skins with the SG553, where instead of using the entire skin, they just color the body, and it's just very like worn down steel, like very used steel, I guess. That's what Damascus generally is, but it's only applied to this part of the weapon. It looks very bad in my opinion. I don't like how it's not the full skin. I'll never say that I do. I think it's probably a bit worse than the sawed but better than all these generic sand camos that we've seen. So yeah, second spawn D tier is where this thing goes. And next up, we have the P2000 Amber Fade, which is infamous for basically being the cheapest and best trade-up purple, which is kind of interesting because you're not going to see too many of them anymore. But these things generally have really low floats and are easy to get low float. So having this is basically having a high float version of the Amber Fade, just having a bad fact new. Not sure why they're showing this one particular. So generally these scratches won't really be here too much, even in the higher floats. I actually know that one because I've done a trip or two with these that didn't record, but have done them. And it has, nice copper back of the Ember Fade, but it does have a lot of the green, and I don't think the green shines at all. And it kind of is why the Amber Fade generally looks kind of shit. It does have a lot of copper though, because it's a small weapon, and there's probably some patterns where you can have like even more copper than this. It just looks okay. It's probably around the same place as the brass for me. Kind of mediocre weapon. I think the brass looks a bit nicer because it's more 'cause it's a more gold color. But yeah. And our final weapon isn't particularly good either. It's the R8 Amber Fade. Um, yeah, the handle still uses the stock black, which does not fit the rest of the skin whatsoever. And the shine on this weapon, this doesn't even look like copper from any kind of shine or anything. The green looks pretty bad in my opinion. It's almost like the color of barf in most lighting. And the copper doesn't shine like it does on some of the other weapons that make the Amber Fade somewhat okay. I can't say this is a good Amber Fade. Um, so I'm gonna put this down quite a lot. I'm honestly gonna put this in the D tier. I think it's still worse than that sawed off because the sawed off generally had a decent color, just kind of ruined by some random splotches. Doesn't look completely horrible. I'd say most of these look pretty bad. But I don't think we had anything in this collection that looked particularly worse than stock or just completely unusable. We didn't really have anything nice here, but we didn't have anything bad. This was a very, very mediocre collection. The fact that the Mac 10 Palm is the highlight is kind of concerning. That the Sand Dune is, in my opinion, one of the best skins here. Yeah, it's not that great of a collection. If I ever were to pick up skins from here, it would be one of these three in the B tier, because they're at least like somewhat nice. They don't look horrible. They would be very usable in game. Everything else, I would kind of wouldn't necessarily want to get. I wouldn't mind having one per se, but I don't think any of them look particularly nice. Uh, Honestly, it's a very lackluster collection. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in the next one.